There is a question almost every woman has asked at some point, usually late at night, usually after something small has left her feeling strange and unsettled. She'll ask it to a friend over coffee, or she'll ask it to herself in the mirror, or she'll ask it to no one at all, just staring at the ceiling. The question is simple, but it carries the weight of 1,000 confusing moments. Does he actually love me? Or does he just want me physically? And if you've ever asked yourself that question, I want you to know something right away. You are not overthinking. You are not paranoid. You are not broken for wondering. You are asking one of the oldest, most human questions there is, because the way men experience desire is genuinely different from what most women are taught to expect, and nobody ever sat you down and explained it properly. So stay with me for the next few minutes, because by the end of this video, you are going to understand something about men that most people spend their entire lives misunderstanding. And once you see it, you will never look at a man's desire the same way again. Let's start with the pain, because before we get to the truth, we have to be honest about how much this confuses people. Picture a woman named Elena. She's smart, she's kind, she's the type of woman who remembers your coffee order and checks in on you after a hard day. She's been dating a man for 4 months. Things feel good. He's affectionate, he's present, and physically, there's real chemistry. But one night after they're intimate, something shifts in her chest. He rolls over, checks his phone, and within minutes, he's half asleep. And Elena lies there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling this cold, creeping thought crawl into her mind. Was that it? Was I just a body to him tonight? Does he only want me for this? She doesn't say anything. She just lies there, replaying the last few weeks in her head, searching for evidence. Did he mean it when he said he missed me? Was that text just something he says to get what he wants? She starts building a case in her mind, prosecutor and defendant all at once. And the verdict she keeps landing on is the one that hurts the most. Maybe I'm just convenient. Maybe this isn't about me at all. If you've felt this, you know exactly the specific flavor of loneliness it creates. It's not the loneliness of being alone. It's the loneliness of being touched and still feeling unseen. It's lying next to someone and feeling like there's an ocean between you. It's wondering if intimacy with him means the same thing it means to you, or if you're just speaking two completely different languages that happen to share a few of the same words. Maybe you've had a version of Elena's night too. Maybe it wasn't even a real relationship. Maybe it was someone you were dating casually, someone you weren't even sure you wanted forever with. But somewhere in the middle of it, this question crept in anyway. Uninvited, unwelcome, but impossible to fully silence. It shows up when he takes an extra day to text back after a night that felt meaningful to you. It shows up when he's affectionate in private, but strangely distant in public. Like he's not sure which version of the relationship he wants to admit to. It shows up in the quiet comparison so many women make without even meaning to, comparing how present he was in that one specific moment to how present he seems to be everywhere else. And here's what makes it so painful. This isn't a small, easily dismissed worry. It touches something foundational. It touches the question of whether you are safe to be fully yourself with another person. Body and heart both, without one being used as a means to access the other and then discarded once it's served its purpose. That's not insecurity. That's a completely reasonable thing for a human nervous system to want reassurance about. And this fear doesn't stay in the bedroom. It leaks into everything. It makes women scan for red flags in totally innocent behavior. It makes them pull back emotionally, just in case, so they don't get blindsided by rejection later. It makes them ask their friends in hushed voices, "Do you think he actually cares? Or do you think this is just physical for him?" And the friends, bless them, usually don't have a real answer either, because most people are working off the same broken map. Here's the truth nobody tells you. This fear isn't really about sex. It's about significance. It's about the terrifying possibility that you could give someone your body, your time, your vulnerability, and still not matter to them as a person. That fear is ancient. It's wired into how humans attach to each other, and it deserves a real answer, not a dismissive one. So let's give it one. Here is the reframe that changes everything. And I want you to actually sit with this instead of rushing past it, because this single idea will save you years of confusion. For most men, physical desire is not the opposite of emotional connection. It is one of the primary ways emotional connection gets expressed and processed in the first place. Read that again. Physical desire is not the opposite of emotional connection. For a lot of men, especially the ones who are not naturally gifted with words, physical closeness is not a substitute for intimacy. It is intimacy. It's the channel through which they feel safe, feel wanted, feel like they matter to someone. Where a lot of women are taught that real intimacy begins with a deep conversation, and physical closeness is the reward that comes after, many men experience it almost in reverse. Physical closeness is often the doorway they walk through to even access their own emotional world. Think about it like two people trying to reach the same room, but through different hallways. A woman might walk down the hallway of conversation, of shared feelings, of verbal reassurance, and arrive at a room called closeness. A man might walk down the hallway of physical touch, of shared physical experience, and arrive at that exact same room. Different hallway, same destination. The problem has never really been that men don't want connection. The problem is that society taught women to recognize connection wearing one costume and taught men to seek connection wearing a completely different costume. And then nobody translated between the two. This is the big reframe I want you to hold on to for the rest of this video. When a man desires you physically, in a healthy, respectful, committed relationship, it is very often not evidence that he only wants your body. It is very often his nervous system's way of reaching for closeness with you. The desire and the desire for connection are for many men the same wire running through the same circuit. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but what about the men who really do just want a physical experience and nothing more? What about the ones who disappear right after, who never call, who clearly are not invested? That's real too, and we're not going to pretend it isn't. But here's the key distinction we need to make, and this is where most of the confusion actually lives. The difference between a man who is using physical intimacy as a substitute for connection and a man who is using physical intimacy as an expression of connection is not found in the desire itself. It's found in everything surrounding it. It's found in whether he wants to know your day. It's found in whether he remembers the small things you told him. It's found in whether the affection continues after the physical moment ends or whether it evaporates the second his own need is met. The desire looks the same on the surface in both cases. That's exactly why it's so easy to misread. But the pattern around the desire tells you everything. Let's go deeper into this because understanding this pattern is going to be the foundation for everything else in this video. The first major lesson is this. For most men, physical attraction is often the entry point into emotional vulnerability, not a replacement for it. Here's a story that illustrates this perfectly. There was a man named Marcus, 34 years old, the kind of guy who grew up being told that real men don't cry, real men don't need anybody, real men handle things on their own. Marcus went through his 20s treating relationships like a series of transactions. Fun while it lasted, no real depth, no real risk. Then he met a woman named Priya. And something strange happened to him that he didn't understand at first. He found himself wanting to be close to her physically, yes, but also wanting to linger afterward, wanting to talk, wanting to know what she was scared of, what she dreamed about as a kid, What made her laugh so hard she couldn't breathe? He told a friend, half embarrassed, "I don't know what's happening to me. I actually just want to lie there and talk to her afterward. That's never happened before." His friend laughed and said something that stuck with Marcus for years. He said, "That's not new for you, man. That's the first time you've let yourself want more than the moment." What was really happening with Marcus is that physical closeness with Priya had cracked open a door in him that words alone never could. He didn't have the emotional vocabulary to say, "I feel safe with you" directly. Very few men are taught that vocabulary, but his body knew it before his mind could articulate it. And the desire for physical closeness became the doorway through which his guarded heart finally let someone in. This is why the analogy of an iceberg fits so well here. What you see on the surface with a man's desire is only 10% of what's actually happening. Below the waterline, there's a much bigger structure. His need to feel wanted, his need to feel like he's enough, his need to feel like someone actually chooses him and not just his usefulness. Most people only ever judge the tip. They never consider what's holding it up beneath the surface. The second lesson is this: men often use physical connection as their safest available language for saying, "I need you," because vulnerability through words has historically been punished, and vulnerability through touch has not. Think about how boys are raised, generation after generation. A boy falls down and cries, and he's told to toughen up. A boy says he's scared, and he's told to be brave. A boy says he misses someone, and he gets teased for being soft. Over and over, from childhood into adolescence, emotional words get treated like weaknesses, while physical affection somehow slides under the radar as acceptable. So what happens? The boy grows into a man who has one narrow channel left for expressing deep need, and that channel is physical closeness. He physically reaches for you when what he's actually trying to say underneath it all is, "I feel alone and I don't know how to say that, so let me hold you instead." This doesn't excuse men who never grow beyond that channel, who never learn to also use their words, who let physical connection become a crutch instead of one tool among many. Growth still matters. Emotional communication still matters. But understanding why this pattern exists changes how you interpret it when you see it in a good man who is simply still learning. Here's an emotional truth worth remembering. A man reaching for you physically is very often a man who does not yet have the words for how much he needs you, not a man who has no need for you at all. The third lesson takes us somewhere a little uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Sometimes a man's desire for physical intimacy really is disconnected from emotional investment, and learning to tell the difference is one of the most protective skills you can develop. There's a woman named Fatima who spent almost a year with a man who was, by every outward measure, incredibly attentive in physical moments, passionate, present, attentive to her in that specific context. But Fatima slowly noticed something. The attentiveness never traveled outside the bedroom. He wouldn't ask about her stressful week at work. He wouldn't remember that her sister was sick. He wouldn't check in on hard days. He was fully present in one very narrow slice of the relationship and almost entirely absent everywhere else. It took Fatima a long time to name what was happening because the physical chemistry was real, and she kept mistaking that chemistry for emotional intimacy. But eventually she said something that I think is one of the wisest lines any woman has said on this topic. She said, "I realized he wasn't emotionally close to me. He was just physically close to me. And I had been calling that the same thing." That sentence deserves to be written down somewhere you'll see it again. Physical closeness and emotional closeness are not automatically the same thing. And learning to tell them apart is not cynicism, it's clarity. It's wisdom earned the hard way. So how do you actually tell the difference in real time without waiting a year to figure it out like Fatima did? Here's the practical distinction. A man who is emotionally invested wants access to your inner world, not just your outer body. He asks questions and actually listens to the answers. He remembers details you mentioned once in passing. He shows curiosity about your day, your fears, your history, your future. He initiates conversation, not just contact. If the physical connection disappeared for a month due to illness or distance, would the relationship still have substance? Would he still call? Would he still care what movie you watched last night? What your mother said on the phone? What's stressing you out about work? If the answer is yes, you're likely dealing with a man whose desire is one expression of a larger emotional investment. If the answer is no, if the interest evaporates the moment physical connection isn't on the table, that tells you something important too. The fourth lesson is about mountains. And stay with this analogy because it's going to reframe how you think about male desire on a deeper level. Climbing a mountain is not about the summit. Anyone who has actually climbed one will tell you that the summit is often the smallest, quickest part of the entire experience. Most of the climb is about the trail, the effort, the shared struggle, the conversations that happen along the way, the moments of doubt and the moments of triumph that happen long before you ever reach the top. A man who only cares about the summit will turn around and leave the second he reaches it. But a man who genuinely loves the mountain, who loves the whole experience of the climb, wants to linger at the top. He wants to look back at the trail together. He wants to remember the climb, not just claim the peak. Physical intimacy in a real relationship is the summit, but what surrounds it, the conversations, the vulnerability, the laughter, the small moments of care, that's the entire trail leading there. A man who only wants the summit and disappears the second he reaches it is telling you through his actions that he never cared about the climb at all. But a man who wants to linger, who wants to talk afterward, who wants to know what you're thinking, who shows up for the trail and not just the peak, that man is showing you something real. Here's a line worth remembering. Don't judge a man by how badly he wants the summit. Judge him by whether he ever wanted to walk the trail with you at all. The fifth lesson brings us to something a little more tender, and it's about how men experience being desired themselves, because this cuts both ways, and most people never talk about it. Here's something that might surprise you. Many men carry their own quiet fear that mirrors the one we described at the very beginning of this video. Men often fear that a woman only wants them for what they provide, for their status, for their resources, for their usefulness, rather than for who they actually are underneath all of that. So when a woman desires a man physically, genuinely, enthusiastically, without any transactional undertone, it can feel to him like some of the most powerful proof that he is wanted as a person and not as a function. There was a man named Daniel who had spent years feeling like the provider in every relationship he'd ever had. Pay for dinner, fix the car, solve the problem, be the strong one. He told his therapist something that stuck with her for years afterward. Something like this. He said that when his partner wanted him physically, purely because she wanted him, not because she needed anything from him, it was one of the only times in his adult life he felt desired for simply being himself. Everywhere else he felt useful. In that specific space, for the first time in a long time, he felt chosen. This is worth sitting with because it reframes physical intimacy from something purely one-directional into something mutual. Both people in a healthy relationship are often using physical closeness to answer the same quiet, universal question underneath everything. Do you want me? Not what I can give you, not what I look like on paper, but me. There's a sixth lesson, And it might be the most practical one of all, because it explains why the exact same man can feel completely different depending on the season of the relationship you're in. Think about a garden for a moment. In the very first weeks after you plant something, everything looks like pure potential. The soil is fresh, the light hits it a certain way, and there's a kind of electric excitement in just watching it grow. That's the early stage of most relationships. The physical chemistry is loud, immediate, almost impossible to ignore. And it can feel in those early weeks like desire and love are the exact same thing, arriving at the exact same time. But a garden that only ever gets attention when it's flowering and gets ignored the rest of the year will eventually stop flowering altogether. It needs watering when there's nothing to show for it yet. It needs weeding on the boring days. It needs someone willing to show up when the garden looks like nothing at all, just dirt and patience. This is where a lot of relationships quietly reveal themselves. Some men are wonderful in the flowering season and completely absent the rest of the time. They show up for excitement and disappear for maintenance. Other men understand that the flowering is just one part of a much longer cycle, and they show up for the watering and the weeding just as consistently as they show up for the bloom. There was a woman named Grace who described this shift perfectly. She said the first 2 months with her husband were electric, physical, intense, and she assumed that intensity was the whole relationship. But then real life arrived. Her father got sick. Work became overwhelming. There were entire weeks where she was too exhausted and too distracted for any physical closeness at all. And that, she said, was when she actually learned who he was. He kept making her tea in the evenings. He kept asking about her father. He kept showing up for the parts of the garden that weren't blooming. She told a friend later, "The chemistry told me he wanted me. But the way he showed up during the driest season told me he loved me." That's the test. Not the flowering season, when desire is easy and effortless for almost anyone. The dry season, the boring season, the season with no bloom at all. Watch what a man does there, because that's where the truth about his intentions actually lives. Now let's talk about what you actually do with all of this, because understanding a pattern without knowing how to apply it just leaves you informed and still stuck. Start by retiring the all or nothing question. Stop asking yourself, does he love me or does he just want my body? As if those are the only two options on the table. Instead, start watching the full pattern around the physical connection. Does the affection exist outside of intimate moments too? Does he ask about your life, your day, your feelings, and actually remember the answers? Does he show curiosity about who you are when there's nothing physical happening at all? These questions will tell you far more than obsessing over the desire itself ever could. Next, learn to read presence, not just passion. Passion is easy. Almost anyone can perform passion in a single moment. Presence is harder to fake. Presence is staying afterward. Presence is checking in the next morning. Presence is noticing when you're quiet and asking what's wrong instead of just assuming everything's fine. A man who gives you both passion and presence is showing you the full picture. A man who only gives you passion is showing you an incomplete one. And you deserve the full picture, not the trailer. Then give men permission to use physical closeness as a doorway, without assuming that's all it will ever be. Some men need that doorway to eventually access deeper conversation. If you shut the doorway down entirely out of fear or suspicion before giving the relationship a real chance to develop past it, you might be closing off exactly the channel he needs to eventually open up emotionally. This doesn't mean tolerating a man who never grows beyond that doorway. It means recognizing that the doorway itself isn't inherently the problem. The problem only appears if nothing meaningful ever walks through it. And finally, protect yourself with pattern recognition, not paranoia. There's a difference between healthy discernment and constant suspicion. Healthy discernment says, I'll watch how this man treats me across every part of our relationship, not just the physical part, and I'll let the full pattern speak. Paranoia says, I'll assume the worst no matter what he does, because I'm too scared to trust anything. One of these protects you while still allowing love in. The other protects you by keeping love out entirely. Choose the first one. Here's something important to remember as we head toward the end of this video. Something that deserves to sit with you long after you close this tab. You are not asking too much by wanting to matter as a whole person, not just a body. That desire to be truly seen, truly known, truly chosen for who you are underneath the surface, that is one of the healthiest desires a human being can have. Don't let anyone, including your own anxious mind at 2 a.m, convince you that wanting emotional depth alongside physical connection makes you needy or difficult. It makes you someone who understands what real intimacy actually requires. And if you've been in a relationship where the physical was always present, but the emotional depth never showed up, where the summit kept happening, but nobody ever wanted to walk the trail with you, please hear this clearly. That says something about that specific relationship, and possibly about that specific man's capacity in that season of his life. It does not say anything about your worth. It does not mean you are only desirable physically and nothing more. It means you were standing in front of someone who either wasn't ready, wasn't capable yet, or simply wasn't the right match for the depth you deserve. If this video helped you see something you've been trying to understand for a long time, do one small thing for me before you go. Hit subscribe, because there's a lot more where this came from and I don't want you to miss it. Give this video a like if even one part of it made you feel understood. And I want to hear from you directly, so leave a comment below and tell me this. Has there ever been a moment where you finally understood the difference between a man who wanted your body and a man who wanted you? I'll be reading through the comments, and I promise you, you are not the only one who has lived through this exact question. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.